Good afternoon. Yes. Thank you, Dr. Reddy. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this last session after a long 2 days, but a very fruitful 2 days. So just for the newcomers in the room, my name is Dr. Marie Lamy. I'm Director of Partnerships at Access Health International. And I'm really pleased to introduce this session, which is co-curated with Women in Global Health Singapore chapter. Women in Global Health Singapore is hosted here in Singapore by Access Health International. As you may already know, Women in Global Health is actually a global movement, and its purpose is to challenge power structures and push for more equality in health. WGH Singapore actually launched just last year in June 2023, so it's still quite new. Since then, the membership base has grown to 65 members and growing even faster. So we are just getting started and coming up with lots of exciting activities and engagement, which we'll tell you a little bit more about later. As you know, International Women's Day was last Friday, 8th of March, and there's been a lot of discussion on gender equity since then, and also gender equity and its relation to health. In the context of this conclave, obviously we can't talk about health systems resilience if we don't speak about equity. It was mentioned several times yesterday, in fact. We talked about human resources as being key, workforce diversity as being a key indicator of health systems resilience. Professor Mala also pointed out in her session on climate and health that we can't achieve climate resilience if we don't push for gender equality. And just this morning, Dr. Nima Asghari also mentioned that equity is one of the indicators of a health assessment for every country. So it's a critical component of health systems resilience, which is why we thought it is a very important topic for us to tackle as a last session for this conclave. So today we're focusing on gender equity and workforce, and we're looking and hearing the stories of our members at WGH Singapore. So to get us started, I'll introduce two people, our keynote speaker, Dr. Uma Aesola, and our moderator, Lindsay Davis. So Dr. Uma, many of you know her already, but for the newcomers in the room, she will share her perspective today on gender equity from India, but also globally to set the scene. Dr. Uma is Global Director of Communications and Partner Engagement at Access Health International. She is a health systems management and public health expert and an advocate for gender equity. With over 35 years of diverse experience in hospital management, strategic planning for healthcare startups, and corporate social responsibility, Uma has served as the chairwoman of the Confederation of Indian Industries Indian Women Network in 2022-2023. And I also would like to introduce Lindsay Davis, right here, who will be moderating our panel session today. And Lindsay is the founder of Femtech Asia Association, a leading advisory and industry network championing women's health through technology. Lindsay is a recognized figure in Asia's femtech sector. She received commendations from Spark in Asia. She was named the 2023 Most Inspirational Femtech CEO and earned a spot on the 2023 Singapore 100 Women in Tech list. With a rich background in multicultural advertising and global luxury lifestyle management, Lindsay's leadership has been featured in NASDAQ, CNA, and the Business Times. Lindsay's been involved with WGH Singapore from the beginning, and we're really lucky to have her on the advisory board for the chapter. So with that, I will first hand over to Dr. Uma for some opening remarks. Thank you.
And for many of you who know me in this room, may or may not know this side of me. But today I gather here amongst all of you, not just as a public health professional, but an advocate of change for gender equity, architects of resilience in health systems. Our theme for this event is Leadership and Careers for Women in Health. And I have here a panel that is going to talk about their particular stories and challenges that they faced across various sectors of health. Gender bias is not new, but there is a bias on both genders, and I'm not going to go into that. And navigating limited opportunities for women is again not new, but there is definitely an unequal access to resources, mentorship, personal narratives, and we will shed light on some of the obstacles of women in health and what they have overcome. It's an exploratory journey that we take forward over here. There will be inequities, and there will be workforces that actually lack the inclusivity of engagement, and that hinder individual progress. I am not going to read more. I'm just going to give you 3 or 4 statistics. Workforce compensation, 70% of global healthcare workforce, as WHO says, and estimates has 25% of healthcare women in leadership roles. So again, there's an equality of there. Pay gap, 28% of the healthcare sector earn less and significantly less than their male counterparts. Is there discrimination, which estimates from 66% to 80% in some forms? And you can find that while workforce in healthcare is largely women, it is definitely not in the areas of senior leadership. There is a special distribution that we need to look at. We need to understand that women do rise and can rise. And these are some of the key challenges that women face. I would like my esteemed panel to stand up and face each other and hold their hands against each other, please. And I'm coming to you. I'm not that short. 2, 4, 6, you're fine. Can you push with a little bit of pressure, please? Push, 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 push. And you found some of them were falling down, and some of them held their balance. And that's a balance we need to strike. Women need to bring balance into more balanced worlds that we are a part of. I'm quickly going to run you through a little bit of my life, and a lot of my colleagues may have some idea of it, but won't know this. And here I am actually going to make myself vulnerable when I talk about it. And I say, don't judge a book by its cover. When you see me, my sisters, and I'm one of 4, and I'm 3 of 4, but I'm probably the driving force for anything that happens in the family. My elder sister, who's more than 10 years, almost close to 10 years older than me, will call me up and say, hey, can I do this? Instead of me asking her, should I do this? So I've been called bossy, I've been called aggressive, I've been called all kinds of things. But I realize that I am so extremely organized that they do turn to me for something called executive leadership. So please don't look at me as a bossy woman or an aggressive woman. Look at me as somebody who has come that far only because I am so organized that I execute better than many others do. I've also been a very curious, thoughtful, detect, and magnify person. And there I quote, and I say, knowing yourself is the beginning of wisdom. There are a lot of times I will stand up and apologize if I have overstepped my mark. And that's not something that I'm ashamed of, because all of us have reason and days that we bring ourselves to work, but we are not our best. Don't hesitate to say, this was not something that I am every day, and tell them that it's okay, today was my bad day, you didn't realize it, because there was so much going on behind me that you couldn't see me. So say that sorry, move on, and make amends. I don't like that. I must get to know him or her better. There are a lot of times that you don't see that exterior of the person and say, why are they so brusque with me? But you don't know what you've done for that, or they don't know what you're doing to them. So it's always good to have a conversation which says, can we know you more so that I know why you're doing this to me or why I am doing this to you? So that brings tolerance, empowerment, and staying connected. Choose your attitude. That's the only thing you can choose. You can't choose what somebody else wants to do to you. So bring yourself with your attitude to bring who you want to be to the woman that you are at the workplace. And I always use this as one of my favorite gestures. And that is, so I know that when I fly, I also encompass the egos of other people around me. You know, those wings are always spread to bring other people into the workforce. And you'd find women are mostly their own, best or worst enemies. So please do make those 10% concessions for women who are a part of your team. Allow them to grow and bring them to fly as much as you did, because somebody else let you fly. There I come to my mentors, and they are gender agnostic. Pick somebody who can talk to you every day, once a month, once a quarter, but do get mentored. And when I share something with any of my team members, I always tell them, it's in your interest, it's in the organization's interest. I have come a long way. And here I will share my personal story. I wasn't allowed to work. I couldn't, after I got married when I was doing my first year in master's. And they thought I was pretty. So I couldn't go into the balcony. I was accompanied to the library by somebody else. Going to work was not an option, because that was the only condition that they had, that I would not work, because they came from a very, very wealthy family. They still are. So how did I actually make that difference? I had to get my uncle to co-opt to talk to somebody else. My father-in-law went and interviewed my first boss for an hour and a half before I cried for 3 days, and I didn't eat for 3 days. He spoke to my father, and my father said, I've given the girl to you. It's for you to decide whether she is going to work or not. And from there, I've been working for 37 plus years, and it is history. So if you want something badly enough, you'll get there. Of my 7 children that I would have had, and 3 that actually almost made, 2 that made it to the earth and 1 that didn't, I have 1 living child, and she's significantly challenged. She made me vulnerable. I cry a lot. And every time I'm on a stage, I have to tell myself, I am not going to get emotional. But I do. But I learned that vulnerability is something that is very special. It gives you the ability to be stronger every time. She lives in assisted living, which I have changed, and I've changed the life of more than 200 mothers and people over there. And there have been 4,000 children that have gone through there, because their mental age is less than 2. And I have found a reason to live, to be able to do a lot of things. So decision-making and choices in life are not easy. I chose to walk a path alone. I chose to help people. I chose the ability to observe myself without judgment, and I try not to judge people. I'd like to hand this over to and ask you to please take forward. Those are some of the remarks, and I really have let myself go this time, because this is not a story I share very easily. Thank you for the opportunity, and also thank you for having me over here to speak to you. Thank you. Lindsay?
Thank you for your openness and for setting the scene for us today with a moment of transparency and trust, which I really appreciate. I would next like to introduce our keynote speaker for this session, Ms. Moutushi Sengupta. She is Chief of Capital Mobilization at the Asian Venture Philanthropy Network, known as AVPN. She oversees engagements with diverse capital providers to deploy financial and human resources to impact organizations across Asia. With a wealth of experience in reputed development funding institutions such as DFID, MacArthur Foundation, Oxfam India, and Co-Impact, she brings a rich experience of 25 years. AVPN also leads an Asian gender network, and she will tell us a little bit more about that too. Over to you, Moutushi. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Uma. First, I would like to really thank you for sharing your vulnerability. It's not very easy. More strength to you. I extend a very warm and hearty welcome to all of you at the annual Conclave 2024. First and foremost, I would like to thank Access Health International and the Global Learning Collaborative for Health System Resilience for having me here today. So why is it important to address equity in healthcare? I mean, a lot of times we just take things for granted that equity is important. But to take a step back to really visit why it is so important. A major reason that systems do not work for the people is that discrimination and exclusion are baked into their design and execution. And often this happens unconsciously. We believe that effective systems change or change at scale can happen only when there is a resolute focus on equality and inclusion, and needs to explicitly address discrimination and barriers on the basis of gender, class, race, ethnicity, sexual identity, disability, and other markers of exclusion. Let me start by quoting a few numbers. 70% of the 1.3 billion people living in poverty are women. A recent report from AVPN, which was launched in the last quarter of 2023, indicated that the state of gender inclusion in the Asia-Pacific regulatory landscape said that women's unpaid care work was almost 4 times that of men. Women are mainly engaged in agriculture, such as horticulture and poultry, and for home consumption. According to the research by Aeon and Women Plus in Climate Tech, women are 14 times more likely to be affected by climate events and 4 times more likely to be displaced because of climate. I quote climate because, in a way, the type of changes and the scale of changes that we are facing as a society is so intense on account of climate change that this is definitely worth building in as we talk about building in more participation from women. Currently, most women are working in informal work with low pay and low productivity and are vulnerable to the changes that are happening to their wider world, including climate change. This is amplified as women represent a high percentage of poor communities that are dependent on local natural resources. In recent times, we have witnessed women taking bigger roles in the workforce, but largely at levels which are at entry level or early stage career development. In 2021, WHO reported that women represented 70% of workforce in global health and social sectors. However, women are estimated to hold only 25% of senior roles. Some good practices are also emerging, including the fact that COVID-19 pandemic led to greater acceptance of remote and flexible work conditions, which has helped members from all gender balance work and care. The data shows that we are going in the right direction, including bringing in more women in the healthcare section. However, much more needs to be done. As women make up the majority of health workers, it is largely women who are responding to health crises, including those that are getting affected by the larger world. At AVPN, we focus on health, gender, climate, and youth, and the intersectionality between all these thematic areas. In 2022, we launched the Asian Gender Equality Fund, a $25 million initiative to support organizations that focus on addressing specific and urgent needs of women's economic empowerment in Asia. As part of this initiative, as Maria also mentioned, we have set up a network of women philanthropists, and many of them are first-generation wealth holders, and we're trying to create that space for them to engage much more significantly in pushing for development in the region. We believe that we should be creating pathways for women to thrive in their professional and everyday lives. The time is now to incorporate a higher involvement of women as active and effective agents of change to increase the resilience of women in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Am I okay to carry on? Yes? Okay, great. Hi, everyone. It's nice to see you. It's always a gift to be given the last panel slot on the second day and the last day of a conference. I think it's an honor that we're sharing up here on the stage. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'd like to ask everyone to save their standing ovation till the end, please. Thank you so much. Thank you. So I'm cutting down a little bit on the intros. First of all, because you can read about it in the pamphlets that were sent out, which are really helpful. And you'll see we have doctors, award winners, professors, leaders, all just right here among these 5, which is incredible. So I'm really honored to get to moderate this panel and frankly quite humbled when I see these amazing people next to me. We have been talking for the past couple of days, me watching more online, but we've been talking for the past couple of days about systems resilience, healthcare systems resilience. So we've been talking about climate, we've been talking about supply chains, regulation, alternative funding, and alternative financing. And I think to end today, talking about careers and how we're building equity in these careers, and I think these 5 individuals next to me, who I'm so grateful to be here with, are really all contributors towards that goal of kind of parity in every way. So I guess starting out, who am I? Why am I here? 1, I'm wonderful with a microphone. Ask anyone I've ever done karaoke with. 2, my name is Lindsay Davis, and I'm the founder of Femtech Association Asia, so looking at women's health and technology solutions and supporting the ecosystem here. We have a couple of founders in the room, like Saskia over here, so it's really nice to see this industry growing. And now for our panelists, the real stars of the show. To my left, first of all, hello, we have Dr. Sien Hsin Lee. She is an advisor to Women in Global Health Singapore. She is a professor at the Saw Swee Hock and CEO also of the American Chamber of Commerce, and this is her, I think, 4th or 5th event today, so we're quite lucky to have her with us. Thank you for coming. Next up, we have Dr. Hishamuddin Badarudin, also an advisor to Women in Global Health Singapore, founder and CEO of Novue Health, medical doctor and public health specialist, over 25 years of experience. I'm sure if you added all of our years of experience up on the stage, it would just be something around old. Next up, we have Dr. Jenny Lowe. Thank you for joining us today. She's a professor at Duke NUS Medical School, specifically in the Emerging Infectious Diseases program, so clearly has had a busy couple of years. She's also Deputy Medical and Scientific Doctor of Sing Health Investigation Medical Unit, so again, very busy individual. Next, we have Dr. Alice Chu. Thank you for being here, a Senior Director of Market Access and Medical Affairs for APAC at Glaukos, a US-based I told you I was going to screw up the word, but we're going to go with it, medtech and pharma company. So thank you for being here. And finally, a friend of mine for many years and big supporter of women's health and technology, who I thank every day, Marion Neubronner on the end there in the bright red, Associate Director, SMU of the Institute of Innovation and Entrepreneurship. So quite a dynamic team today. And we're going to start with a few questions. So again, if anyone in the audience has a question, please raise your hand. Love a good chat from the crowd. It's also a good opportunity, I think, to kind of get to know other perspectives than what maybe I'm asking. So please don't be shy. I know I sound a bit shy, but please don't be shy. The first question I have, actually, I'm going to go right to you, Alice. What a surprise. The surprises keep coming on this panel. So my first question, Alice, is what challenges have you encountered as a woman in your sector of work?
You know, I'm from the U.S. and by the way, I like being on these panels because it makes me reflect. Because all I've been doing is execution. So I've been thinking about this challenges as a woman, and let me just tell you, as a graduate student in the U.S., it was in my programs 80% women. Okay, then I moved to New York and joined a company. I mean, gender issues never crossed my mind because it looked equal to me. And it's not until I came here, I mean, even at one of the largest healthcare MNCs here, the whole team was women. And then I joined another healthcare company, again, a large MNC. In the Singapore, at least in Southeast Asia, it was quite equal. Now, interestingly, now I've joined a mid-cap company, a US-based company that's on its growth phase. There's only 3 of us based in Singapore, right? And we are direct in a big office in Japan and Australia. This is where I see, you know, there's some opportunities that could evolve within the company that I'm at right now. And so what do I do? What do I see is it's quite heavily male dominated in the commercial team, and it could be because of affinity bias. Because as you are starting to grow a company, you hire people who you know, right? And the other things I've seen is maybe performance bias. Like, for example, things that are involved in, can you buy something as gifts for the people? It seems like the leaders tend to gravitate towards women. Maybe they're good at it, I don't know, but that's just what I've seen. The other thing I've seen is at a regional role, meaning you cover Asia Pacific, is in some capacities, you know, people, women who have children, young children, it might be extremely difficult. So there have been companies where I've seen the women who are there at a regional level are not married and they don't have children. You know, so those are just some of the challenges that I've seen.
And Jenny, could I direct that same question for you?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to talk about my own experience. So I joined the medical school in 1993. Before that, obviously, we all had to go through interview for medical school selection. And when I told my mother I wanted to study medicine, my mom said no. Yeah, because she felt that, you know, the career was going to be really tough for a girl. Yeah, but good thing I insisted, and she couldn't stop me from doing it. I went ahead and was very thankful that I got in. But I'm not sure how many of you actually know, back then in the 1990s, there was actually a quota for female medical students in Singapore. There was a 1/3 ratio, 1/3 to 2/3 ratio female to males. And so I was very fortunate to even get in and to be able to study medicine and now practice medicine. And it wasn't until 2000s, I think Marion may remember the year where this quota was abolished. And now we have an equal, almost half-half. In fact, probably a little bit more female medical students than male medical students currently. I think simply because female generally perform better during interview. Yeah, so you know, maybe there is a little bit of the advantage there, and so more female. We have more female medical students now. But you know, as I then went through, then I graduated, went through my medical training as a doctor. And as I then decided to go for further specialization, we had to go through more training. We had to go through more training, and again we had to go for interviews. And there was 2000 when I sat for my interview. The entire interview panel was all males, and the questions asked were very sexist. I was asked, "Are you going to get married? Are you going to have children?" And that was 2000. You would thought that, you know, these questions shouldn't be asked, right? But even then, they were asked. But I'm so glad. I know now over the years things have really improved, and these questions are no longer allowed during interviews. So I'm actually very happy to see the changes that has happened over the last 20 years. But like what Alice said, as the female doctors work, there are a lot of challenges, right? We are put in many directions. We want to advance our career, but we also want to settle down, have children. And now in my senior role, in the hospital and in the university, I struggle with a lot of talented female doctors who want, who have and many of them have a PhD, so they not only have a medical degree, they have a PhD as well, and they really want to go into research, but they are very torn because they are in their early 30s, so it's also, and the clock is ticking. They want to settle down. They want to have their first kid, and start a family, and they struggle. They really struggle with a decision whether to go into research, because they know that's just going to take more time away from the family. Yeah, so this is played out every day, and I have these conversations with young female doctors so often, ever so often, and I suppose because there are also very few female doctors who are, I'm actually not young. I'm already. I can actually announce my age. I'm already 50, so I kind of feel senior enough in the medical system to have some of these junior female doctors coming to ask for advice, and it is very tough. Yeah, I think maybe do you want to ask the rest, and so that I don't hog the mic for too long?
I think this is really interesting, the perspectives around challenges, because we're seeing it, as companies scale. We're seeing it in decisions being made of where people go in their careers based on their life stage. I like to hear that there's a lot of mentorship, whether it's proactively being offered or people just coming to you and you're turning into a mentor, whether you like it or not, and I think that's great. So I guess my next question is Hisham, I'm going to come to you next. Maybe I'll just keep going in order. What inequities do you think remain related to gender in particular, or other inequities?
Thanks, Lizzie. I'm very cognizant for being the only guy in the panel. I'm actually also the only male advisor in the Women in Global Health Singapore chapter as well. But I am an advocate for women's health, and I am. Let me tell you the story. I've never always been like this. Okay, when I was younger, obviously you had your female colleagues, and you would think, gosh, why do they have to take time? The kid's sick, and they all these things. They have to kind of like take care of their family and things like that. So, but as I grew older, I'm nearly 53, by the way. As I grew older, senior, with the experience, you realize that actually, and I know I'm not answering the question, okay, right? So I realize that actually, it doesn't matter whether you're a guy, a girl, or nowadays they have they as well. Doesn't matter. What matters is whether you have the experience, the knowledge, and everything else to make a difference to your team, right? So, I am the founder of this company called No View Health. It's a startup. It's new. I'm the only guy. Okay, so yes, my co-founder is a 26-year-old medical doctor. As I say, I don't care whether you're young, whether you're a girl, whether you're they, or whether you're he. As long as you can do the job, it's fine. Okay. Recently, she told me that she wants to go part-time, start a family. Of course, I had my reservations because I was thinking, okay, you're supposed to be a co-founder, you're supposed to, do this. But then again, I thought, well, why not? Right? So, it's fine. I still see inequities in the healthcare sector. Okay, I still do. I worked in the Ministry of Health. I shouldn't say this out too loud, actually. I used to work in the Ministry of Health Singapore, and I was the, for a while, one of the secretariat for a high-level meeting every week. And I would sit in. I was basically a glorified minute taker, and and it will be all the high-level executives, minister, parliamentary secretary, and all the directors, director generals, and everything else. You would see that there is still an opportunity for women to play a part in that. My role in the Ministry of Health was actually to do with crisis preparedness. Crisis preparedness. So if you've read about a lot of the outbreaks or crises that happen, not COVID because I left after that, before that, in the past few years, from 2010 onwards, behind the scenes will have been me, managing it. And to me, the most important thing is if there's a crisis, and remember, right, in Singapore, all the men are part-time soldiers. Okay, if there's a crisis, right, who is going to uphold the healthcare system? Right. Simple question. Right. So I think if you think from that perspective, right, if you think about it from that perspective, there needs to be more equity in the healthcare system for women. And I truly believe that if you increase that equity, increase the access, okay, the whole healthcare system in terms of quality can also improve, right? And studies have shown that. So anyway, I'm not going to hog the mic, but I think it's 2024, right? But I still think there's a lot more to be done, and we'll take steps towards achieving that equity in terms of salary, opportunities, right? Yeah, and I didn't know about the 1/3, quota because I went overseas to study, yeah.
That's great. Thank you very much. I think it's interesting to think about, again, a lot of different stages of companies talking about entrepreneurship and starting with, it sounds like, operating without bias or endeavoring to operate without bias, but we all have unconscious bias. We all have biases. So along with making sure it's a value in a company or a startup or within our programs academically or wherever it is, I think it's also looking at making sure that we have the policies in place, the systems in place. They're going to continue to support that value. So that's kind of one idea on what I'd love to see tackled is making sure on a baseline level the governance is there to support. And so I guess to you, Sian, I would ask, what is one thing or one change you'd like to see tackled that you think would make a strong impact?
Sorry, strong impact on?
Healthcare systems resilience through gender equity.
Yeah, it's been thank you. Well, thank you everyone for having me here, and I'm so pleased to be part of this panel. I've enjoyed all your stories, and it's made me think a lot about what it means to be a woman walking into the room when we are talking about health systems. And so while I appreciate a lot of the sentiment, I think the reality is that when you walk into the room as a woman, immediately there are assumptions made about who you are, what you stand for, and what you can deliver. So if we're going to talk about equity, the first equity piece that brings everyone to the same platform is, frankly, mindset and societal change, right? That if we don't start to bring women and have them be perceived in the same way when they walk into the room, then we're not going to make any changes. There have been plenty of studies made, as you know, that women leaders are perceived differently, have the different opinions formed about them for the exact same behaviors as men. And if you want to go more simplistic, examples of where you take away the gender factor and judge people on their skill set and their behavior is very different when you do not know what that person's gender is. Here's an example. maybe I should ask, how many of you have played in orchestras, symphony orchestras, bands? Okay, good. We got some orchestra geeks in the room. Okay, so if you remember when you audition for a seat, right? You want to be concert master, you want to be first chair. Typically, you go into a room, there are a few people there, you play for them, and then they decide where you sit in the symphony orchestra. Now, years ago, for the professional symphony orchestras, for any of you who remember, and we all just confessed our age. So I do remember when I was a kid, you go to performances, and most of the orchestras are made of men. Okay? Now, most of your music teachers, however, are likely to be women, so take note of that. But most of the professional musicians at the time were men. How do we actually increase the number of women in symphony orchestras? And you can substitute that with operating theaters, with, ministries of health. When the person goes in to audition for a symphony orchestra, they began to do it so that the judges were blinded as to the person's appearance. That helps on a number of factors, right? Because we know height makes a difference, ethnicity makes a difference, but it also makes a difference on gender. Within a very short amount of time, you start to see women professional musicians increase, the number of them increase within these symphony orchestras, to a point that nowadays you generally see gender balance on symphony orchestras. So the next time you go to a concert, take note. A large part of that came about because they started to blind the audition process to gender and to other visible characteristics, because we humans rely on heuristics to make judgments about whether someone's capable, whether a particular product is good enough for us, because we're just trying to take shortcuts and we make a lot of assumptions. Right? So I think in the healthcare system, we need to find a way to bring women up to the same platform. In order to do that, I think we need to try to blind us to all the assumptions we make when a woman walks into the room and apply for a role. Because I'm not immune to it either, even if I'm woke and aware, because I also grew up with some assumptions. So how do we strip away the gender from the things that we need to do in order to look at skill sets and behavior? It's not as easy as as we like to think.
Absolutely, I think you're very correct on that. And following on what you were saying, using the orchestra as an example, Women in Global Health Singapore wrote a paper, and I think released it on International Women's Day. But it has some really great statistics on gender in healthcare overall, whether it's in pay or representation at the leadership level, but also some information about Singapore. So it's worth definitely going online, following them on LinkedIn, and just having a look at that paper. Definitely worth a read. Marion, I want to come to you because you you co-edited a book about women's struggles and opportunities for women in leadership in this region. And I'd love to hear a little bit maybe that you could share about this topic.
Firstly, I want to thank Access and everyone else who invited us. For me, your presence here is the community that we actually need moving forward. Okay, so it says Singapore Management University, but I was formerly at National University of Singapore School of Medicine. I'm a trained psychologist, yeah. And to answer Lizzie's question, I want to answer it with a story. So I spoke also on International Women's Day in an energy company run by a Malaysian family, right? So it run family office, and mostly men energy company. And the man leader was saying, we need to find more women. We're committed to looking for these women in engineering and putting them in the company. And then all the videos were about, we want to support women. And I looked at him and I said, not from me. I said this from the 150 women that I've met who are STEM women, right? We have this twice a year now, 2 times now, led by this wonderful lady called Juliana Chan. And these young women go into a room and they tell us how they're not worthy enough. They keep saying that they have PhDs, they have medical doctors, and every single word inside the word cloud will be, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not fast enough. These are 30-something, 20-something, right? And where did this come from? Because of what Christine said. From the time they were young, if you put yourself in the competitive setting like that, your job is to what? Be the best. And even when you're the doctor, PhD, Wonder Woman, okay, you're still not the best. There was only one guy in the room. He said, I don't understand. I have no PhD and I have no medical degree, but I cannot see why you all would do this to yourself. So to answer you and answer that gentleman in the energy company is not go and find the women. Go and make the women. Go and help the women become STEM women. That's what we're not doing enough of. right? In one of the chapters of the book, we wrote specifically about this. Too many younger people, I don't care, gender, I don't care, right? Ethnicity, they're dropping out because there's privilege involved in being in medicine, right? There's privilege involved in being able to go for that degree, right? That time. Singapore International Foundation invited me to be a mentor to a woman startup in India, helping younger women in rural areas to actually take the actual medical exam to become medical students. In these parts of the region, they didn't even know there was this exam. So this young girl could probably be the next doctor, but there's no such mentoring, no such support. So these are little issues that we are responsible for. And when I see all the great work you do, when you talk about DNA, right? When you all talk about how there's community resilience, it's actually that DNA of that woman or man that supports the other woman, man, everything, to know that they can do that, right? So it worries me a lot. So in the chapter in the book, please buy the book, there's seemingly not enough books on women leaders, healthcare in Asia. There are none, okay? There are none. There's not enough, zero. We couldn't find anything, so we started writing. There's some about STEM. There's the maternal wall, how many women who are facing that when they come to that level of their career, right? There's a lot about networking and how we don't network enough. We're too busy as doctors, she just told me just now, to talk to other people, right? One last story before I hand it back. I'm so proud of my Singapore healthcare system. My mother was the one that benefited. 3 months she was in Singapore General, about to die a few times, right? And that's why I changed from education to healthcare. I'm so proud of it. But it is not an easy system. No healthcare system is. It is pressurizing, it is tiring, right? And too many younger women who are in healthcare, and not even younger, older women who are in healthcare, are getting burnt out. And they are not an example, neither are they good to go. So this story that will remain here and online is some of the nurses in some of our hospitals, post-COVID, okay, post-COVID, mentioned for the first time that I don't think I can function today. I have cognitive fog. We didn't have this before. You understand cognitive fog, right? When a nurse cannot manage so many things because there's too many things going on and she doesn't feel she's able to do the work today, she will tell her supervisor, I don't think I can do some of it today. And that will be an act of courage, an act of honesty, and an act of measurement of healthcare. And we have increased that number that we didn't have before. And that worries me a lot.
It's really powerful, and I think that continues building on the idea of mindset change and societal change and how we're treating our healthcare workers as well. So in the interest of time, because I know that we were ending at 4:40 and we're at 5 to 5. Sorry? Oh, okay. Perfect. So I just wanted to kind of round out. I'm going to give 2 options as a friendly moderator today. Answer one of the following 2 questions. The first one is, what is something that really excites you about the healthcare system and the resilience, or examples that you've seen that really motivate and you feel are exciting? Alternatively, what would be a piece of advice that you would have to any women trying to tread a career path in what you've done in your sector? So what are you excited about, or a piece of advice? And if you want to go nuts, you can do both. I'm not going to limit anyone. We don't limit women on this panel, or men for that matter, okay?
So, gosh, these are big questions again. Thanks, Lindsay. I guess I would like to talk overall about healthcare systems. And I appreciate the fact that there are men in the room. So thank you so much for being here today. And I do think a lot of the conversation, we do focus on women. There has been a bit of a backlash, hasn't there? Ipsos survey came out last week about Singapore saying men were feeling left out. Men felt there was too much attention paid to women. So I want to make sure that you also feel included in this conversation. And in fact, just now, sorry, sidetrack. Dr. Hisham mentioned this idea of women, and I think Dr. Lowe said the same, about women needing to take time off for childbirth. The same thing, as we know, paternity leave, the the support we want to offer to fathers so that they feel that they can be involved. I feel like you've been shortchanged, frankly, as men, having this pressure put on you to continue to deliver, despite the fact that you also have a family life. So when we only talk about women, we only talk about mothers, it really cuts out a whole segment of the population who are caregivers, who are fathers, who are mothers, who are wives. You know, the whole caregiving conversation is, I think, really important, and that's where I think men should not be left out, because you are also caregivers. But in terms of the healthcare system related to caregiving, I think I do see, and some may disagree, but I feel, because I used to be responsible for selling value-based healthcare on behalf of the large medtech company where I worked. And what I liked about the value-based healthcare conversation was not about pricing. Everybody wants to talk about pricing and cost, and that is a big, big issue for us when it comes to talking about healthcare. But what I liked about the strategy behind it was the focus on patients and patient outcomes. And so while in most countries the concept of cost with relation to quality, with relation to value and patient outcomes is really complicated and gets people really riled up, what I want to always bring people back to is this idea of focusing on patients and their needs. And an example of that, of course, pandemic gave us so many amazing examples, some really awful and some really great. One area in Singapore that I think really Singapore has done a lot to improve it is around migrant worker health. And it's an example of an underserved population that was really quite neglected until the pandemic came. And I see healthcare systems rallying and saying, we missed this, we need to fix it. Now the solution, as you may be aware, I sit on a board committee of SATA ComHealth. It's a social impact organization that has both a profit-making arm that feeds into the charity side. And the focus of SATA ComHealth for migrant workers is, out of 6 migrant worker dormitories in Singapore, they won the contract to manage the healthcare of 3 out of the 6. And for these 3 migrant worker dormitories, healthcare is provided on a capitation basis. So I think the cost to the employers is about $100 a head for SATA to provide the healthcare that all the healthcare that these migrant workers need for $100 a head. And I like this example because it shows that we are starting to now think more about how do we contain costs but not at the expense of patients. And that's what we need to talk more about. And I think healthcare systems now, because of this question around value and cost, needs to take into account patient outcomes, patient-reported outcomes measures, PROMs. That's what I'm really excited to see expand in our thinking and develop further in the way we execute healthcare around the world.
Thanks, Yanxian. Thanks, Lindsay. I'm going to try and tackle the second question, because at the age of, I think it was 16, I asked my father whether I could go overseas. I was living in Brunei then, go overseas to study. Of course, Brunei. Anyone here is from Brunei? No? Okay, good. Okay, Brunei is very quiet, and I thought I wanted, to go overseas and experience living in another country. And I wanted to study history. Okay, why? Why history? Everybody asks me why. Why history? Because history teaches you that human beings make mistakes over and over and over again throughout time. Okay, right? And historians actually make history, not the people who make do the events. It's actually the historians that make it. So, wanted to study history, maybe Oxbridge or something like that. But then my father said, "Nah, go and find your own scholarship, right?" Okay. So I did, and I got 4 offers. One was accountancy. As karma will make it, I ended up working for Deloitte at one point in time, but not in accounting. Then 2. It was engineering. I wasn't good at physics. 3, law. I was always in trouble when I was young, so I thought, nah, forget that. And then medicine, and it came with A levels in the UK. So I thought, why not, right? Okay, so do that. And I thought I could change to medicine in the second year of university, to history in the second year of medical school. I couldn't. I was stuck, But I learned to, I learned to like it. I learned to love medicine, I wouldn't say excel in it, but, survive till this day, right? Haven't killed anyone anyway, yeah. Hopefully not. All right. Okay. So, so if I was going to advise anyone who wanted to go into medicine, okay, not just whether you're a woman, whether you're a man, be careful what you wish for. Know what you're getting yourself into. Talk to someone who can spend the time to do that. I welcome A-level students to come to my place, my clinic, and be interns and things like that. And I tell them, look, right? It's not just for the guys, for the women, but also for the guys. You're going to sacrifice a lot, right? I mean, I'm talking about being a doctor, but also being a nurse and being in other things as well. You need to know how doctors think, right? Whether some doctors look down on other professions. It's a reality, right? I also think that because of my name, okay, I get discriminated against. But anyway, that's another story, right? Okay, right? Yeah, because a lot of times I walk into a room, they say, "Oh, you're Hisham, right? Yeah, Hishamuddin, right?" I'm like, "Yeah," because I don't look like Hishamuddin. Okay, I probably look like, I don't know, Tom Cruise. No, maybe.
I was going to say George Clooney.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's okay. No, but so know what you're getting yourself into, right? Okay, and I think be brave, stand up. Okay, because I'm a person who actually appreciates that when someone says, "No, you're wrong." I need time off. I need to do this and things like that. And I wish at some points in time during my career, I could have said that as well. Yeah, right? Yeah.
So I think from a system level, I have to be very honest that Singapore is actually in a very, I'm very glad, right, that I was born here, and grew up here, had all the opportunities given to me despite some of these biases that I mentioned earlier on. But actually overall, Singapore has really been very progressive, and the changes, again, from my mother's time to now, in a very short span of 40, 50 years, we have seen a lot of amazing changes in terms of equity. But of course, all the panelists have said a lot more can be done and should be done to further narrow that the difference. And I have no doubt we will continue to work towards that, right? And so ultimately, I think when we reach a stage when we can all be gender blind, it's not just like Hisham said, male, female, or any other gender preference. That if we can be gender blind, I think, and have respect for everybody, and everyone is given the same option, same choices, then that's true equity. For the individual level, I suppose, for the young ones in healthcare, my advice is to seek out mentors. Mentors are so critical, and I'm sure it's not just in healthcare sector, right? I'm sure in every other sector as well. And mentors doesn't have to be mentors in the area of expertise, right? Mentors, when I was growing up in the healthcare system, I had two sets of mentors all the time. Actually, all were males. It really, was so difficult to find female role models. It's actually easier now, but when I was much younger, it was really tough. So I had two sets of mentors. I have one mentor for the scientific or medical expertise, and I have one for psychological support, mental and emotional support. Yeah, because one mentor may not be able to fulfill every role. I realized as I was growing up. Yeah, so and I find that having 2 or 3 or even 4 mentors really helped in my journey and helped me to survive the very tough years of training and having been put in so many directions as I was maturing. Yeah, so if the young ones ask for advice, that's what I would say.
I'm going to take your second question in the context of a female working in the corporate sector, right, in healthcare. And I actually gave these pointers to an NUS training last week in market access. So I think women tend to, or maybe women in Asia tend to not self-promote themselves, and I think they should. You got to leverage that LinkedIn, right? It's okay to put your achievements down. The second thing is, I think type A women tend to not promote each other. So one thing that I've self-reflected over the past 7 years is that the feedback that I've given to women who deserve it, what I've done is I lobbied hard with their boss. I write feedback, an email thanking them for what they've done. I copy everyone who was in that. I also copy the boss. It's not just women. There's a new young man who just graduated from university, biostatistician, who helped me so much in answering the questions. I copied the VP, right? And he's what? Biostatistician number 2. Because if I could just make someone feel happy, right, for what they've done, then I think I've done a lot, right? And of course, the more we do this, the better.
That's why she's in the same group as me. The other group, the Women Leaders in Healthcare Asia group, the one that wrote the book. That's why. Okay, just so you're clear. Basically, there's 2 chapters in the book I'm very, very proud of. The book is called Journeys of Women Leaders in Healthcare and Asia, Pushing Boundaries. And the 2 chapters I am most proud about are the Middle East chapter, which was very difficult to write. We had a member who is, two or three members who are in the Middle East. One's native to the region and 2 are not. And to write about what they were actually feeling, not just as a difference in gender, but difference in also nationality, ethnicity in that countries or those countries. So what we did, we turned it on its head. We actually got a lot of the senior women who are healthcare women who are from that region, and we interviewed them. And we interviewed them, and in that doing, our women got a chance to actually network further into the region because they had reason to. They had a book to write, a chapter to write, but also that we had both the aspects of the regional women as well as the women who are coming in, who are international medical care people, right? Now, why that mattered so much to me is because this person that I was advocating for is a younger scientist. And she was also challenged by where she was and still is. Yeah? Our India chapter surprised me beyond no end. I just so you know, I really love India. I've been up and down many, many times to work with tech companies in Bangalore in my previous life when I was corporate trainer. And they wrote about being single. This professor is a woman professor, medical professor, and she wrote that how difficult it is to be a single medical doctor as a female for all the strangest of reasons that I couldn't fathom, right? Which was obviously the danger of walking to and fro the hospital at night, or how to get there and all that type of thing. Because, you know, and all the questions she's asked about being single, that makes it strange for her and uncomfortable. And this was their choice to write that chapter, not mine, right? And I was educated by that. So what I'm actually saying is I'm very happy we have voices in the room. And I'm sure there's so much more. But at the same time, I'm also very confused why our voices didn't rise up earlier. And maybe it's now because there are more people advocating. So I'm so glad for that. So I'm very proud of the book. One thing that we did differently also, and I'm going to end on this, the women who could afford to do most of the heavy lifting, money-wise and time-wise, we lifted a lot. Without those editors, myself included, but the other editor, this book would not have happened. Without the extra money I had, seemingly as a Singaporean woman, which I do not have, this book would not have happened. So we did our best to make it as fair as everyone who wanted to write could write. And my virtual assistant is a Nigerian master's student woman, waiting to get her PhD and needed the money to help us to do this, so we gave her money as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this panel. It's never enough time with any of you individually, and certainly putting us all together in a room is a disaster for time. But always such a pleasure, because it's such a gift of knowledge and your leadership and what you guys do, as all of you have mentioned, with kind of mentorship being key in what everyone has brought up here. So thank you so much. Are there any questions from the room for this esteemed panel that we have? I see it. I wish I could see that far, but I'm 25, so my vision isn't very good since we're doing our ages. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm Trish from Heidelberg University in Germany. Great panel, thank you. I might just ask a challenging question, but I think you ladies and gentlemen can probably take that and like a challenge. There's no question at all that there's gender inequity, and in some places that's more of a problem than in other places. I'm Australian and live in Germany, so there's been a lot of change and especially in high-income countries. It's definitely not such an issue as in lower and middle-income countries where we live in, where there's quite gendered societies. But I'm a bit concerned that gender is kind of being used as a synonym for women and girls, where gender means women, girls, men and boys. And climate change, which is my area of research, affects women and men, girls and boys differently. And especially in my particular area, which is climate-related migration, we see a lot of boys, unaccompanied minors, being displaced because of climate change. So I just think we need to keep a little bit of nuance in the gender discussions, because it seems when we talk about, in this case, gender in health systems resilience, we talk about A, promoting women in healthcare, or B, equal pay. But I'd like to hear a bit more discussion about bringing boys into the HEAL disciplines, health, education and literacy. How do we bring more boys into those disciplines, and not just about bringing women into STEM? Because in Australia there are more female medical graduates than men, and that's the case in a lot of OECD countries. So just wondering, have you thought about bringing boys into HEAL? Is that part of your thinking and your activities at all?
I'm going to try, I'm not going to be able to answer you directly, but I'll answer this. I don't think it's a gender issue. I never thought it was a gender issue. I think it's a privilege issue, people. Privilege and vulnerability. And if we speak clearly about that, then yes, there are very many layers. In this part of the world, because of the fact that we're career women in healthcare, then yes, I would still talk about, because if my woman leader doesn't get high up enough to do anything, there are a lot more people that will be impacted, including children and families. I'm not saying the men don't do their part, but so to me, it's a privilege issue, and privilege comes with who got there first and who has more resources to stay there longer. And yes, I feel totally for the children and any other vulnerability, disabilities, and other ethnicity groups, yeah.
I so love your question. I have a 21-year-old son and a 15-year-old girl. And it's and I feel so fortunate because it's my son who reminds me to try to be as little biased as I possibly can, because I'm like feminist AF, right? And he's like, there are men in this world too, please do not forget about us. So he reminds me of that. When it comes to the caring professions, or HEAL as you call it, when he was growing up, he needed a lot of different kinds of support, particularly social emotional. And often for young boys, it is necessary for them to see men who are good role models. His dad was one, but one is not enough because daddy can't be with you all day. So you need to go to school and see male teachers. You need to be able to go to therapy and see male occupational therapists, male physiotherapists, right? You need to see men in all of these different kinds of professions. And he responded well when there was one because he felt also a natural affinity. Not that he didn't do well with women therapists, but it was nice for him to see a mix. But there weren't always male therapists available to him. So this idea that we do need to get men into the caring professions is so incredibly important, but how do we move them into this space is another issue. I'm gonna complain a little bit about my adopted country, Singapore. So during the pandemic, I'm American, so Americans, yeah, just take it with a grain of salt. But you know, during the pandemic, there was definitely a shortage of healthcare professionals, particularly in allied health. There's an article that came out in the Straits Times that said, essentially that we needed to bring in more healthcare workers from overseas because there weren't enough local Singaporeans who were willing to do this job. Okay, logic accepted. But instead of, in this article, presenting a solution, which is essentially that we need to get more Singaporeans, men and women, interested in the caring professions, the article is simply just an explanation of why we need even more foreign workers in Singapore to provide these types of caring services. And I was like, so we're not gonna teach local Singaporeans how to care for each other and teach them that these professions are also valuable contributions? That is where I think men, as they start to look at professions, discount this kind of role, because toxic masculinity is a real thing. You are expected to go after certain jobs, and the caring profession is not positioned as one that makes you into a man. So that's my observation of my son, who I think is even more aware of it than I am. So we'll see where he ends up, but I have confidence to know that he will consider all options.
So I have to add to that. I'm not a psychologist, even though I'm a trained psychologist. I'm a trained counselor, psychologist, blah, blah, blah. Because it doesn't pay enough for me to do what I need to do with my life. And I struggle with this all the time now. Right? A lot of my allied health people don't feel that they're paid enough for the hours we do and the burden we carry. I've been seeing Singapore through a bit of a suicide spike in the last few months. I'm tired. Before that, it was burnout from COVID and healthcare. So that's the other thing. So we can't suddenly wave, you all know this answer, right? Your healthcare, right? You think I'm not going to be able to make all of you get the money you deserve. But at the same time, we're having a dialogue about it for the first time. And the new generation, doesn't mean the old or new, yeah? Young. The new generation of people hopefully have new thoughts about how to solve this together, where people work is valued, where your work and my work is valued more.
Thanks. My question is an extension to Dr. Patricia's question. So in many of the low and middle income countries, we have frontline workers who are mostly female. So a lot of agency is still with the men in the family. So how do these women actually ensure that there is equity, or they are able to make the impact they need to make in the absence of male frontline workers? So I think that's something which I'd like to hear from you.
I know you walked away without the mic, but I'm just trying to, maybe it will help us if we get some clarification. So if I understand what you said correctly is, many frontline workers are women.
Yeah, we have, like I'll give you an example of India. We have social health activists, and we have auxiliary nurse midwives who work on the front lines. And most of them are females, and they work on family planning. And family planning is a very sensitive issue, wherever there is a male preference. So there are not many male frontline workers. So these women actually are really working on the fringes. So I was hoping that that's also a career in healthcare. So I was hoping if you could discuss around that. I hope I could.
How to recruit more men to do this kind of work.
Yeah, so it ties in with the first question, right? How do we get more men to come in and do this allied health, go into the caring profession and everything else? So I mentioned that I used to work in the Ministry of Health, so I was a policy maker. And I think you need to tackle it from all aspects. So this is going to be a very bureaucratic, kind of like stamped answer, okay? All levels, multi-sector, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so let's put it this way, right? If you ask any boy or girl, right, what do they see as a nurse? Draw a nurse. What would they draw? Okay. If you ask them a doctor, or even a healthcare manager, what would they draw? Okay. I think if you want to tackle this, you can't tackle this at our level. Okay? It's a bit like some of my patients, 50 to 60, and they say, look, doc, forget about the lifestyle changes, just give me the medicines, okay? Right? Okay. Yeah, I can't change. Right? I think we can still change, we can still instill that change at this level. But where we need to start is actually start at the ground roots, right? At the 4-year-olds, the 5-year-olds. So for that, we need to then teach the parents. We need to teach the teachers. We need to teach the policymakers, right? So one thing is that when you write policy, you need to write it for everyone, right? So one good way is to try and drive that in whatever policy we do, right? Whether it is in healthcare or healthcare workforce and things like that, we try and do it from not just health. Because if you try and tackle it from just the healthcare sector, this is going to be a long fight. You tackle it from the education part, the parents part, and everyone else. Teach them, and then in 10 years, you'll find that you'll get people drawing a nurse is actually a guy. Okay, a doctor is actually a lady. Yeah. Okay. Right. So I think that's the way to do it. It's not going to be easy, but who we need to tackle are basically tackle it from the policymakers, the grassroots, and the middle. I think that's, yeah. And that's another question there. Okay.
No, but I just have to say, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I'm totally serious. So I used to be a communications person, and I think a lot of it actually is messaging and making these things fun, cool, sexy, attractive as a career choice. So I spent a lot of time consuming media of all types. And there's this young man named Alex who is a nurse. He's Korean American. You'll find him on TikTok, but he's funnier on Instagram. I think he uploads stuff to Instagram more frequently. You go find him because he's very real about what it's like to be a nurse, but he also makes it seem funny, interesting. We need more of these communications tactics that we use to go and sell all sorts of nonsense to people. Why not we use it for public health good? There is some good communications tactics being deployed in public health, but we gotta make it fun and sexy and cool.
So firstly, I want to honor the person who asked that question and all other healthcare professionals and people in the healthcare profession that are unnamed. Community health has always been there. Right? Before there was a doctor, there was the village person that helped to heal people. So we cannot answer that question today, but we honor all those people who do their best to help the other person. And regrettably, sometimes there will not be other people standing behind you doing that with you. You may be the only one, or you may be the only one of your gender, right? Or of your ethnicity or that group. But that's why I'm so happy to be part of a women's group, because we are trying to come together. And there's allies, and there's mentors, and there are other industries. So for now, I thank you and press on.
Table 19.
Hey, my name's Christian Vidicchio. I'm from Australia. I think this is a fantastic topic and something that is ongoing in Australian healthcare, just Australia in general, around females in the workplace. You touched on a couple things. Firstly, look, females are unique. I've recently become a dad. My wife has given birth to 2 beautiful children. Men can't do that, in fact. If we did, we'd be extinct. All right? I think that's a fair assessment. And so seeing her, how she's navigated wanting to maybe go back to work, and there are challenges. So I think we have to understand that there's a role for males and females, and that there are challenges that if females decide to walk away because of family reasons, because the amazing thing that they can do, then there needs to be ways that we can allow them not to miss out. And it's always a hard one. I was in private sector for a long time. How can you not give someone a promotion who's been working there for a couple of years? You don't know when they're coming back, but you try. And it is complex. And I think no one knows the answer. You can be the most amazing organisation. Can you wait 3 or 4 years for them to come back, have another child? You don't know. It is not easy. But I'll go back to, and some of the things I've seen is that I've seen kind of also, I'm always scared to say this topic, but we're starting to talk about now the bros. I've seen it go against males, where we put quotas on things. And I think whilst quotas are very important, I think that creates discrimination, because ultimately, my comment could be, it could be a board of 70% females. It shouldn't be 50-50. If 70% of the females that apply for the job are better, and there's only 30% of the males that meet the criteria, if you had to just pick a board of 10 and you had to, then why are we trying to pick a quota 50-50? We should be trying to strive to get people access to apply for those jobs, apply for those roles, understanding the challenges that females go through their life. And I think that's an important thing to have, especially in the healthcare sector. And going back to your point, I think it's more around gender bias. And we did this course, a topic, a few weeks ago, and it is around gender bias. The way we are grown up to think, and the comments that we may say about men, the comments we may say about males, females, they're, as innocent as they may seem as when you're young, in the long term can create a negative impact. And I think that's right, because there's one saying that stood out, and you're right. If you think about nurse, think about doctor, the example was a father and a son are driving in the car, and there's a car accident. The father dies at the scene, the son's rushed to hospital, and the surgeon goes, I can't perform surgery on this person, it's my child. And everyone in the room was quiet, trying to work out who it was. Do you know who it is? Yeah, it's the mum. Everyone was dumbfounded. I think it was the dad, but it couldn't be the dad. He just died. Did he come back from the dead? Even I was actually quiet for a second. I was trying to think about it because it didn't even click, right? And so it really planted a good seed around gender bias, and how, just over the years, how we've grown up. And I think education is probably key to that. And I think that if we start having sensible conversation as youth, I've got a boy and a girl, so very, something I definitely want to do. Saying comments like you kick like a girl would be completely wrong, You want to make sure that they're fair for both. I think that's probably the most sensible approach when you think in the long term. Unfortunately, going to take time. That's the only problem, because you have to break through a generation, right? So, but I think it's, it's a really important topic that we're talking about. But I think gender bias is actually really some of the biggest things that we're probably challenging. And I think actually that gets missed most of the time, to be honest. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for your thoughts. Really appreciate that, actually. It's a great way to, I think if you guys don't mind, I'm going to wind up the session just in the interest of time. We've only gone like 50 minutes over, so it's totally fine. I wanted to actually ask Marie if you could come to the stage and maybe just wrap us up for today, if that's okay. And thank you, panelists, again, for being here and for your great insights. Really appreciate it. So maybe a round of applause.
Also a round of applause for Lindsay. Thank you. So just very briefly, we spoke, I found this super interesting to hear your views. Obviously, it's a small snapshot from healthcare career professionals in Singapore. We know that in Singapore, we have it easy in terms of equity because there are better access to education and work opportunities for women than in some other settings in Asia. So this is something for us to remember. But we spoke, all of the comments were essentially diverting our conversation around the broader topic, which is inspiring inclusion. And that's really the key. Actually, that's the tagline of International Women's Day last Friday. It's about inclusion in general. It's not just including women, it's inclusion in general. And the way to do that, as we spoke about, it's education, it's smart communication, it's also changing policies in the workplace. There's one article I read last week that really struck me. Sometimes women reaching leadership positions in one organization isn't just about promoting them to further roles, but it's about changing the work culture, changing the policies so that men are also able to take the same time off, and changing mindset to say that equally all genders have the right or the possibility to take time off to be with their families, that there shouldn't be pressure either way for someone to take time off work to be with their families because they're a woman, or for a man to continue working because they're the man. It really goes both ways. So that really struck a chord with me. just to wrap up the conversation, hearing from stories of our Women in Global Health members will continue. We're hoping to set up, starting around May, a podcast series where we'll be interviewing more members. So I'm excited about that. And the longer term objective is also to set up a mentorship program through Women in Global Health Singapore. And we spoke about that earlier, that being an essential component of uplifting women in these careers. We have a LinkedIn page, go check it out. You can read our paper there. You can also come and see me or my colleagues, Yushi or Amita later, if you want to sign up to the Women in Global Health Singapore chapter network. It's free. We need volunteers. We need bright minds. We need new ideas, new energy all the time. And also, we need funding to support our activities. So if you've got ideas on how we can make that happen, we're also open to hearing them.